one of his lectures, he talks about how he feels like he can be friends with people from other eras, although he admits it's a pretty one-sided relationship. He talks about his love of Spinoza and how he feels like a friendship to Spinoza. And so that's why I dedicated my book Transcend to Abraham Maslow, a dear friend I never met.
He turned my life around, literally. Keep watching to learn more.
Book 3 in the new Thinking Aloud dialogue series is UFOs and UAP, Are We Really Alone? Now available on Amazon.
New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu. You can now download all 8 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today, we will be discussing the life and work of the great psychologist Abraham Maslow, and we'll be exploring the science of self-actualization. My guest is Scott Barry Kaufman, who is a professor of psychology at Columbia University and director of the Center for Human Potential. He hosts the Psychology Podcast, which has received over 30 million downloads. In 2015, he was named as one of the 50 groundbreaking scientists who are changing the way we see the world by Business Insider. He is the author and editor of 11 books. His most recent book is Rise Above, Overcome a Victim Mindset, Empower Yourself and Realize Your Full Potential. Today, we will be discussing his book, Transcend, The New Science of Self-Actualization, about the life and work of Abraham Maslow, a psychologist who was a huge inspiration in my life, and whose theories of human potential have been updated and revised by Dr. Kaufman. He is located in New York, and now I will switch over to the internet video. Welcome, Scott. It is a pleasure to be with you. This is our first interview on New Thinking Aloud. I hope it won't be our last.
Wow, Jeffrey, it's so great being here. You're such a legend. I feel very honored.
Well, it's an honor for me, and I have to say, more than an honor, you got me in touch with something I had forgotten about. I knew that I had met Abraham Maslow, but it was 56 years ago practically, and I got in touch with why I did that practically as soon as I completed my undergraduate degree. I had a job in a behaviorally oriented mental health center in Rockford, Illinois. I quit in disgust after 6 weeks and drove in my car 2,000 miles to California with the intention of meeting with Abraham Maslow and hopefully, I thought, associating with him in some fashion. That didn't work out, but it was why I drove 2,000 miles.
But he was cordial to you?
He was very friendly and very definitive that at the time he didn't want to affiliate with a person who was a long-haired hippie and an anti-war protester. But other than that, we had a very nice conversation.
He made that clear to you? He actually said that?
Yes.
Yeah, his last ever journal entry it's a beautiful journal entry, but he does talk about his frustration at the anti-war protesters and the kids these days. Sort of, that was very much a vibe of his last journal entry. But yeah, he talked about how he does what he feels like he must do.
He was friendly toward me, and he's not the first psychologist who basically suggested I should get out of psychology. I also had an encounter with Harry Harlow at the University of Wisconsin, who made a point. I was on a Greyhound bus coming up from Chicago, and Harry Harlow stood up and insisted I sit next to him. And the reason was because he was curious what these long-haired hippie students were all about. And we had a nice conversation for 2 hours riding to Madison from Chicago, but he told me I should definitely not pursue a career in psychology.
That's hilarious. Well, Harlow and Maslow obviously were connected. Yeah, he was Harlow, right? Wasn't he a mentor of Maslow's?
I didn't know that.
I believe so.
Of course, he was famous for his studies of rhesus monkeys and the big monkey lab he had in Madison.
Yeah, I believe that's where Maslow got his start in his research.
Well, one thing Harlow told me is absolutely no long-haired students would ever work in his laboratory.
Well, he was right. You charted your own path.
Yeah.
And you followed your own self-actualization bliss, as I'm trying to do myself. So good. I mean, good for you. It speaks highly of you, I think.
Well, I think that's the connection that the two of us have. Somehow Maslow and his focus on peak experiences and self-actualization had a deep impact on each of us.
Absolutely. There's something about his way of being, probably as well, that attracted us.
Mm-hmm.
And and he was just he had such a great way with words. His lectures, I've listened to his Esalen lectures, from like 1965 to 69, and they're so wonderful. In fact, one of his lectures, he talks about how he feels like he can be friends with people from other eras, although he admits it's a pretty one-sided relationship. He talks about his love of Spinoza and how he feels like a friendship to Spinoza. And so that's why I dedicated my book Transcend to Abraham Maslow, a dear friend I never met.
He turned my life around, literally, because when I was a senior in psychology at the University of Wisconsin, I decided I would write what they then called a senior honors thesis on the psychology of religious mysticism. And I went into the project with the idea that obviously religious mysticism is some form of psychopathology. And I was going to identify what the pathology was and write about it. But when I encountered Maslow's book, Toward a Psychology of Being, and his description of peak experiences and how they are just like mystical experiences and how they are the core of some of the most successful self-actualized people in our whole culture, I realized I had it backwards.
Yeah, his later work on peak experiences are great, but I actually prefer his writings in the last 9 months of his life on the plateau experience.
I met him, as I recall, in September of 1969. That would have been just about 9 months before he died, or 6 months before he died.
Yeah, and at that stage of his life, he was very aware of his mortality. He had already had a heart attack, where the doctor said he could have another heart attack at any point. So he says in his writings that during that time he was living a post-mortem life.
I suspect he meant the term post-mortem a little bit differently than I would mean the term today.
Yeah. He just meant, but he said he wishes everyone could die and then come back again and see that death wasn't so bad.
I presume he meant that metaphorically, not literally.
Yeah, I assume metaphorically. I don't know. You never know with Maslow.
He came right up to the edge of parapsychology, as far as I know, but I don't think he crossed that line.
Yeah, he didn't cross. Yeah, I agree. He was a little skeptical of. He was skeptical of tarot readings and crystals. I know he was skeptical of crystals, and crystal healing. But you, Jeffrey, you have no problem with the paranormal.
None. Absolutely none.
Yeah. Do you believe in ghosts?
Well, I believe in apparitions. The people. Yeah. I would say so. In fact, my life, not only a couple years after I met Abraham Maslow, my life got a real boost when my great uncle Harry died in March of 1972. And literally at the moment of his death, 2,000 miles away, I was asleep in bed in my home in California, and he came to me in a dream, the most powerful dream of my life. I woke up from that dream crying tears of joy and singing a very sacred song in the Jewish liturgy. At the time, I was a graduate student in criminology, and that's when I decided that I had to shift my whole career focus from the negative side of human deviance to the positive side of human deviance. So my great uncle's ghost or spirit literally caused me to turn my life around.
I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing that you that long ago, and you still remember. Do you still remember the dream itself?
Oh, I would never forget that dream.
It's amazing. That's so rare. That's so rare.
It might be more common than you think.
Maybe. Do you believe in past lives as well?
It's not a question of belief. It's a question of data. I would say you're a scientist. If you look at the research coming out of the University of Virginia, where they've collected 2,500 cases of young children who remember past lives, and then they go out and send field investigators to see if the information provided by the young children is accurate. They have, last I heard, over 1,200 cases they describe as solved, where the young children are accurately describing past lives that they remember.
Yeah. Dr. Jim Tucker has been on my podcast. Yeah, no, I hear you. But anyway, I should let you ask the questions.
It's such fun to be with you, Scott. I think
likewise. You think I'm what? Finish the sentence.
I think you're something else.
You can't just stop there. I think you're...
Well, I did watch a video, a wonderful lecture you gave for the Vedanta Society of New York, in which you described yourself as a quirky person, which I thought was lovely. And in fact, I've even watched your Twitter videos of you dancing and shooting baskets and lifting big tires. I've been on your Twitter channel, so I know what kind of a person you are.
That's actually TikTok. I have no idea what you're doing on TikTok,
no,
Jeffrey.
You're right.
You need to stay away from TikTok, Jeffrey.
It was linked on your website, so since you linked to it on your professor website.
All right, Jeffrey. But wow, that's amazing that you were on my TikTok page. That's incredible. Well, yeah, I mean, that was, somebody's got to get through the pandemic somehow.
I think it's more than that, because in your description of self-actualization, you point out that one of the important qualities, one in fact in which you said you are working on, is to accept all parts of yourself. And I think your willingness to exhibit these quirky parts of yourself in your lectures and on TikTok is an example of you moving in that direction.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's right. Maslow distinguished between impulsivity and spontaneity, and he really disregarded the young people's focus on impulsivity. But he argued that spontaneity is very important for self-actualization, and kind of bringing your whole self to the table. I'm actually on my website trying to find out where in the world my TikTok link is. I didn't know I did that.
Well, it just took one click.
Amazing. Okay. It is what it is.
Not only that, I saw your TikTok image of your father dancing in the 1970s.
Yeah. Isn't he cool?
Yeah.
My dad is so cool. He's my best friend.
It made me realize he's my age.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. You guys are the same, very similar age, if not the same age. Yeah, that's right. Well, so what's your main viewership these days for the new, version of this podcast? How does that viewership differ from, the old one?
We have good statistics from YouTube on the current viewers, but we never did get demographics on the original Thinking Aloud series, which had probably a much larger audience because at one time we were carried by 100 PBS stations all over North America. Currently, I can tell you this, our audience is at least 2/3 male. And I know from your research that males tend toward what you call, or what researchers call, the dark triad.
Well, how would I phrase it? I would say that at the upper tail of the dark triad personality trait distribution, you find a very disproportionate number of males relative to females. The top 1% tail. It's very true. It's actually it's incredible. Just the stark gender difference, and we also find the reverse in our light triad research. We find women are a much higher proportion at the top 1% of the light triad. So I've been wondering how we can get more women into leadership positions, light triad leadership positions, positions of power, because they don't really want power as much as men. Men seem to, on average, really like money and power throughout the course of human history. Nothing new.
Your research concerning men and women in the dark and light triads is probably, of course, I wasn't aware of that research till recently, but I think implicitly, subconsciously, it's the reason why I've been a feminist all of my adult life.
Yeah, that's totally fair enough. But I imagine you've noted that the feminism has changed. There's different, over the course of your life, the core things that the feminists are fighting for has changed over the years.
I hear people mostly on the right complaining that feminism isn't what I think it is, that they talk about the new wave of feminism and how dangerous it is and so on. But I've never experienced that. I have very little idea what they're talking about. Maybe you can enlighten me.
Well, I think that's because you're not on Twitter that much.
Yeah.
If you were on Twitter, you would be caught in some storms. So, but yeah, we don't need to open that can of worms, my friend.
Okay.
There's different factions. It's a shame, though. It's a shame. I mean, I think we all we should there should be some uniting principles of feminism. But I'm no expert on feminism, so we should move on.
But you are an expert on the light triad. So let's define exactly what that is.
So the three members of the light triad are Kantianism, which is treating people as an end to themselves, not a means to an end. In the dark triad you had let's just define the dark triad first. So we have Machiavellianism, which is manipulating people, psychopathy, where you're lying all the time and you get a thrill from causing destruction everywhere you go, and narcissism, really feeling a sense of entitlement for your superiority. Grandiose narcissism. Well, the white triad is Kantianism, which is not using people as a means to an end, but treating people as an end to themselves. Humanism, which is treating every human with dignity and respect, every individual with dignity and respect, and faith in humanity, believing in the fundamental goodness of humans, even though you're not ignorant to the evils of the world. Which is an interesting thing. The word evil is an interesting one, because like Rollo May and Carl Rogers had a real interesting debate on that, and Rollo May called Carl Rogers naive, overly optimistic. Thought that was
because Carl Rogers believed in the essential drive toward wholeness within each person.
Yes, and Carl Rogers was like a little bit simple-minded sometimes, even though I love him. I mean, he could have a serial killer and he'd be like, "Don't worry, I have unconditional positive regard for you." It's like, get the fuck out of here, Carl Rogers. Like, this guy's a serial killer. Like, it's okay not to have unconditional positive regard for everyone.
Serial killers are a tough case, but I worked in San Quentin prison when I was a criminology student in the psychiatric unit, conducting group therapy sessions with murderers and rapists. And the fundamental lesson I learned from that experience is exactly what Carl Rogers was saying, to treat them with positive regard and respect, no matter what.
I totally get his argument, and he has made the case that in no instance, and no matter how antagonistic or aggressive a patient was, did he see a move in the direction of socialization once he applied unconditional positive regard. So yeah, I get all that, but still, come on, let's be honest. So
serial killers may be in another category.
Yeah, right? I'm just like, I'm not like, okay, fine, good for you, Carl, but I'm not going to respect serial killers. I'm just not, or like Nazis, just not my thing.
Right, and in most contexts, there's no reason that you should.
I'm not a therapist. I'm a professor.
You are also a coach, though, as I understand it, and the developer of a school of coaching.
Yes, this is very true, Jeffrey. You have really gone down the SBK rabbit hole, haven't you?
I'm fascinated by your many accomplishments at what, from my perspective, seems like a very young age.
Oh, I'm a weirdo. But sorry, what was the last thing you mentioned about me? What was it?
The fact that you developed a school of coaching based on self-actualization.
That's it. Thank you. Your memory's better than mine, if that makes you feel any better.
It makes me feel younger, yeah.
Yeah, that makes me feel any better. Self-actualization coaching is what I call it. And I've trying to apply it to different populations. We're actually wrapping up a 6-month training program for general personal coaches, but I have dreams of going into schools and developing a curriculum for teachers to be self-actualization coaches, and I have a dream for like youth sports coaches, teach them these principles, and maybe in the healthcare field, that'd be nice too for doctors to learn the principles of self-actualization coaching. So yeah, I have a vision of like places I want to take this work.
My impression overall of what you're doing is attempting to put humanistic psychology back on the map. Back in the 1970s, when I first got involved in humanistic psychology, it was a big movement, especially in the San Francisco Bay Area where I relocated. But subsequently, it seems as if it's practically dead and forgotten. And I get the impression that your goal is to revive it.
I identify as a humanistic psychologist in a lot of contexts. And because I want to make the point that there's a very specific set of principles that I adhere to. And so I view it as not just a form of psychology, but as a way of living one's life. It's a whole, as Maslow would say, a whole gestalt. He loved that word. He loved that. And so I'm committed to trying to understand how we can help people feel alive, experientially alive in their life, find a life of meaning, find a life that focus on what's in common among us, as opposed to focusing solely on our divisions. But it's a bit interesting because we live in such a divisive climate right now, especially in America, that it feels like what I'm saying in certain circles is controversial. How dare I try to focus on what's in common? Some people are so committed to hate right now that it's hard. It's almost like it's controversial being a humanistic psychologist in the year 2025. Can you believe, by the way, that we're in the year 2025? Can you believe it? Like, when you think of that year, are you like, doesn't that feel like the future?
Yeah, you're right. It does. I mean, I have to say, how did I all of a sudden become 78 years old?
78 years young. You mean? Yeah, my dad says the same thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I feel young and old at the same time, actually. I had 2 knee replacements last year, so that reminds me that my body for sure is getting older.
But I mean, you have a new knee.
2 new knees.
So, it should make you feel young again. You've got like 2 new knees. I mean, do you know what you can do with that?
Well, you'd be surprised what you can't do. I was told I cannot run. I cannot jump. I have to protect the new knees.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I don't know what you're protecting it for, but okay.
Well, no, you could seriously damage a new knee, actually.
Okay. So no NBA for Jeffrey. Okay.
No, I was never a good basketball player.
Well, you can still dance, Jeffrey, a little bit. You can still shake your hips.
Or at least sway back and forth a little.
Not like the 60s. Not like the 60s, though. Were you at the season of love? Were you at the summer of love?
I came to the San Francisco Bay Area right after the summer of love. I arrived in 1969.
I've got nothing to recall there, so.
It was a very exciting time. I don't think people today appreciate how the feeling in the air was one of revolution, that we were going to change everything. And through humanistic, transpersonal psychology and parapsychology, and now I can look back 50 years later and say, yeah, the world did change because of computers and because of the internet, that humanistic, transpersonal psychology, positive psychology, and parapsychology are slower. They're still going to, in my opinion, change the world, but they're so deep and profound that it's just going to take longer.
Yeah. We need more of an army.
Mm-hmm. But the army is building, and you're one of the field commanders.
Okay, yeah, I need more people to enlist.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the most popular subdiscipline of psych. I mean, positive psychology is very popular. Martin Seligman. Have you ever had Martin Seligman on your podcast?
I have not, but I'm very fascinated by the fact that you work closely with him for years as the science director of the Center for Imagination, scientific director. And
the Imagination Institute. You got all of that half right, Jeffrey. You got all of that half right. Let me try it. I was scientific director of the Imagination Institute at University of Pennsylvania with Martin Seligman. Yeah. And so I got a real close, intimate view of positive psychology. And then decided I wanted to really identify as a humanistic psychologist after that experience.
Can you define those two terms, positive psychology and humanistic psychology? Because half of our viewers won't know. And especially, how are they different?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I try to bring in, there's some really great science in the science of positive psychology, some really good researchers leading the way on the science of meaning, the science of purpose, the science of happiness, positive emotions. Barbara Fredrickson has a whole research program. Sonia Lyubomirsky has done a lot on the science of gratitude. And so I try to integrate all these things in my work. So I don't think there's really clear-cut distinctions, but the field of positive psychology, it's very science oriented, very quantitative, not very qualitative. It's very the kind of topics that they're interested in are things that like happiness and life satisfaction and quantifiable things. But humanistic psychology, you start to have a greater love of an interest in like Rollo-May was the arts, for instance, and existential issues. There was a field called existential / humanistic psychology, which is nowhere to be seen really. Maybe in California, certain universities in California. Like I tend to just grasp for like deeper explanations for things than the kind of surface level explanations. I still work in the field of positive psychology and teach some of that in my classes. I think there's some really great stuff that it's important that it's being studied.
We were talking earlier about Maslow and how his encounter with the possibility of death, his heart attack, and his knowledge that he was close to death seemed to awaken within him certain states of consciousness that I think he felt were otherwise inaccessible.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. And he's always grappling with the higher reaches of human nature. Always. And even up to his last minutes on this planet, he was grasping for, what is the third force? What is the fourth force? He was thinking of the fourth force, fifth force. He actually was thinking of the fifth force, which was animals, being able to really appreciate the consciousness of animals. That was like his fifth force. He called it transhuman psychology. And that's I read the essay. I went to the archives, the rare Maslow library archives. I couldn't bring in my phone. I couldn't bring in water. I was there a whole day, and I was so parched that I was hallucinating. But it was worth it. It was worth it. I got some great material that will forever be in this noggin of mine. Well, not forever, but.
So would it be fair to say that humanistic psychology is more willing to look at fear, death, pain, tragedy, trauma than positive psychology?
Can you ask me that one more time?
Would it be fair to say that positive psychology is sort of neglecting the positive merit of looking at the dark side of human behavior, whereas humanistic psychology embraces it?
I want to give a huge shout out to Dr. Paul Wong, who tried, may he rest in peace, he tried to create something called Positive Psychology 2.0 that really appreciated the dark side and existential issues. I think that was kind of, he didn't have to do that. Like, he didn't have to create a Positive Psychology 2.0. I think he could have just called himself a humanistic psychologist like I do. So, he was trying to create a brand, right? But again, may he rest in peace. Nothing but love for Dr. Paul Wong and what he was trying to do. Really appreciated it. So there's a small cadet of people within his orbit, researchers who are still alive, who are working in what they call Positive Psychology 2.0 or existential positive psychology. So it exists. It's still not a big thing.
Let's talk more about Abraham Maslow. He was one of the founders of the Association for Humanistic Psychology.
I think he was the central founder of the field.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you say so?
I would, indeed. In fact, there's a wonderful story. I don't know if it's in your book, but at the Esalen Institute, Michael Murphy talks about in the very early days down in Big Sur, California, he gathered a group of people together to talk about Maslow's work. And they're sitting around having a discussion when Abraham Maslow happens to be driving down the California coast on Highway 1 and sees this sign for Esalen. And he thinks maybe it's a hotel and he can stop there for the night. And so here's this group of people talking about his theories, and in he walks into the room itself, an amazing synchronicity.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And, they were just so excited that he showed up there, and very deferential, and, wow, the great Abraham Maslow is here. And he was there with his wife, Bertha. Yeah. And it was very late at night. They were scared that they were going to fall off the cliff. It's not easy driving in that area at night. If you've ever driven in that area at night, you hear the waves crashing against the rocks.
And sometimes the road gets washed out. It's one of the most beautiful highways in the world in the daytime, but it certainly has a dangerous feel to it.
Yeah, I really got a kick out of that story. Yeah.
Maslow got together with a number of other colleagues, James Bugenthal and many others, and formed the Association for Humanistic Psychology, which they described as, if I recall correctly, a third force in psychology to distinguish it from Freudian psychology on the one hand and behaviorism on the other.
It was really needed at the time because I think there was a loss of the full humanity. Studying that within the field of psychology, there was a very, Harvard kind of experiential approach. Experimental approach, not experiential. Experimental approach that really left out the full humanity, and then of course the Freudian kind of psychoanalytic approach, very focused on our sexual and aggressive instincts. I would also give a shout out to the emerging cognitive scientists and psychologists who also recognized there was something missing there and tried to initiate, my mentor Herb Simon at Carnegie Mellon. Before I was his last research assistant, and he really was one of the founders of cognitive psychology with his Think Aloud approach and the work he did with Alan Newell at Carnegie Mellon. And but yeah, the humanistic psychologists, also recognized there was something really big missing there, a lot of topics that were missing. In fact, Maslow was the first one to coin, don't tell Martin Seligman I said this, but Abraham Maslow was the first one to coin the phrase positive psychology. Marty doesn't like it when I bring that up. But yeah, there was an appendix in one of Maslow's books on personality called Toward a Positive Psychology, and he outlines all the areas that the field of psychology has not really looked into. Yeah, and it's a beautiful chapter.
Well, I understand you began your career studying intelligence.
I did. That was what I was obsessed with for so many years, and I thought that was my purpose on this earth. I thought that was it. That was, what I was here for, folks. It was to redefine intelligence, to come up with a new theory of intelligence. And I did that, and life went on, and here I am 10 years later, 15 years later, and now I'm, like Maslow, constantly searching for higher reaches of human nature. I mean, intelligence wasn't it. Intelligence wasn't the highest reach of human nature, so I got bored with it, quite frankly.
Well, you began, as I understand it, defining other forms of intelligence that were being neglected by IQ tests.
Yes. I don't know. Well, I don't know if I would quite put it that way, because I have a pretty nuanced view of the situation, in which I think that there is a hierarchy where a G factor does exist. It's hard to ignore that. The general intelligence, all these kind of abilities or forms of cognition and reasoning do tend to positively correlate with one another in the general population. But I do think, for sure, there are all different sorts of ways that humans get undervalued, or, to use Stephen Jay Gould's phrase, even though I have some criticisms of his book, ways that the mismeasure of man, we should be more politically correct, call it the mismeasure of humans. I know you're a feminist, Jeffrey, so the mismeasure of men and women and those with they pronouns. So, there's a big mismeasure of humans. And especially in school systems where we measure everyone on kind of the same measuring stick. And a lot of kids with all sorts of different neurodiverse ways of seeing the world and strengths and talents don't get a chance to really develop those things because we're so stuck on some standardized metrics. So that's really my argument. But I don't argue that IQ tests are useless. I don't argue that, I have a nuanced argument.
One of the points you make, if I understand it correctly, is the characteristics we described earlier, the light triad, is not correlated with IQ testing.
That's right. We never actually done the test. No one's ever looked at the correlation between the light triad and IQ, but we can extrapolate based on what we know about the personality structure research, and it's linked to IQ. We know that the agreeableness domain of personality, which is where the light triad firmly belongs, is not correlated with IQ. You can be an colossal asshole and have a high IQ, and you can be a really nice person and have a high IQ. That tends to be about a zero correlation there. So yeah, I think we can extrapolate that data.
So the light triad is more about being a good person rather than a smart person.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, the word good is a judgment call. We try not to do that too much. We try to just describe things as they are. It's having a, this is how I would put it. It's having a benevolent style orientation towards others. Those who score high in the dark triad tend to have a very malevolent orientation toward others. They're constantly scheming. They're constantly strategizing how they can exploit others. So that's how I would describe it. Now, whether or not you think one is good or the other depends on your orientation toward others. I mean, colossal assholes, sometimes they think they're good. I mean, there's the Al Capone effect in psychology. Al Capone is quoted as saying, despite all the things he's done, he's like, I think I've done more to help the world than anyone.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, these guys don't see themselves as evil. I mean, I think people we think are colossal assholes, I think that they have their own inner system of justification. My
understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but when I was an undergraduate in psychology back over 50 years ago, there was a big emphasis on the authoritarian personality and the research that had been done shortly after the Second World War by some of the Holocaust survivors and others about what created this horrible event of Nazi Germany and the Holocaust and so on. And they developed the notion of authoritarianism. And I'm presuming that the work that you began to investigate, the dark triangle, came out of that in psychology in general, there was a big emphasis on let's discover what causes all of these malevolent effects in society. And then you came and said, yeah, but we're ignoring the other side.
Yeah, yes. And in fact, one of the main quotes in my paper I wrote with my colleagues on the Light Triad is from Anne Frank in her journal diary, noting that, as she says, despite everything that's happened, I still believe humans are good at heart. And that's a real light triad way of viewing the world. I mean, after everything she's been through, and she knows she's being hunted. You know, I mean, it's crazy to think Anne Frank was These motherfuckers hunted innocent humans just because they were Jewish. It's just so unbelievable to think about. And I think we started to see we're seeing a resurgence of it today.
Well, that is obviously a concern for people. And not only are we seeing a resurgence of it, I think we're seeing a glorification of it, that there's a segment of society that says this is what we need right now, is an authoritarian government that can clean up the mess.
Yeah. No, I agree. I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on that.
It seems to me that there's a lot of psychological and sociological research about authoritarianism, and the general attitude is that it doesn't work very well.
No, it doesn't. Not in the long run. It might in the short term. For very specific purposes.
Somewhere along the lines, people in humanistic psychology, existential psychology, positive psychology, transpersonal psychology, and probably many other movements like the whole coaching movement are suggesting that we shouldn't focus so much on the negative and ignore what we can also learn about highly effective people who are satisfied with life.
I think that's a very important area of research. It's what I teach at Columbia.
But you've made a number of refinements to the work that Maslow pioneered. I want to get into them, but let me ask you, why do you think Maslow has been largely forgotten?
It was a long time ago. How many people, honestly, from the 60s, thinkers, writers, are still talked about today? I mean, I think Maslow's talked about more than Rollo May.
Yeah, probably.
Very few people know who he is when I bring him up in lectures. People still at least have that meme of the Maslow pyramid, even though Maslow never drew a pyramid. I think that helped immortalize him, though, the idea of the Maslow pyramid. I don't know. I mean, I think there's just it's very hard for anyone to, and it's sad. It's sad when you think about it. It's very hard for anyone to really have a sticking of their ideas and who they are beyond their lifetime. It's a very sad. I know it's like a very sad thing to think about. We all want to think that we're going to transcend and we're going to leave a great legacy, and then. Like at least 100 years from now, people, will still listen or watch us.
It wasn't just Maslow, though. It was a movement.
Yeah. Thanks for focusing me. I got a little too existential there. It was a whole movement, and I just don't think. I think it was tied to the hippies. It was just tied to the human potential movement in the 60s. It's just that's it. It's not. There isn't, as much as I would like there to be a modern day human potential movement, and I'm trying. It's not in the ethos as much.
No, it isn't. And I remember growing up in the 70s in Berkeley, and it was like everything. There wasn't anything else but human potential in my life in that era. And so it's very strange for me to see like the world has moved on, and the human potential movement is largely forgotten, except maybe for a few little pockets like the Esalen Institute.
Yeah, the Esalen Institute still exists, so that's good. It's a shame. It's a real shame. The positive psychology movement is what has the traction, and it's big. I mean, it has a very large number of people that go to the conferences. There's the conference right now is going on in Australia, the yearly IPA International Positive Psychology Conference. It's big. So. It's just different times, different focus. People in this era are obsessed with biohacking, maximization, achievement, happiness. not self-actualization, meaning, being, social service. I mean, these were the issues of the 60s. It's a shame they're not as much the issues of the day.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I've implicitly associated positive psychology with Norman Vincent Peale and the power of positive thinking, and maybe to some degree the New Thought movement and some of the things that William James was writing about in varieties of religious experience. Is there a direct connection?
I don't think there's a direct connection. I think a lot of it grew out of Martin Seligman's research on optimism, which is probably conceptually tied to the Norman Peale stuff, though. Let's be honest. Yeah. No, you're not wrong, but I don't think that was the direct connection.
Oh, okay. Let me ask a different question then. Earlier, we were talking about the distinction between experiment and experience.
Yes, sir.
You were indicating that humanistic psychology is emphasizing experience, not just experiments. Is it possible that the human potential movement has sort of fallen by the wayside because of lack of good research?
There are a number of positive psychologists who are interested in a lot of the topics that Maslow talked about. One of my main collaborators, David Yaden, is interested in studying the science of awe and wonder. And so it exists. I mean, a lot of those topics are being studied scientifically today. They're being studied in a quantitative way. There's not as much of a qualitative analysis of this stuff. I think a little bit of a shout out is in order to Kirk Schneider, who's trying to carry on the tradition of the subjective nature of the awe experience and applying that to therapy practice. And he actually co-wrote a textbook with Roll May, they knew each other. But yeah, I think there are scientists though who are interested in a lot of the ideas. They don't really maybe necessarily credit Maslow Maslow's not very he's not talked about it much in the field of psychology today. I mean, I tried with a book I wrote, but... Yes,
it did seem that you were, in your book, both resurrecting his memory and updating his theory based on subsequent research.
And confirming that he was right about a lot of stuff, scientifically.
One of my best friends back in the days when I lived in California knew Maslow. And he told me that at the end of his life, Maslow reversed the triangle so that self-actualization was at the bottom instead of at the top. Are you aware of any of that?
No, but that's a lot of people from the indigenous community argue that Maslow stole that really his theory was just an inverted TP, and community actualization should be at the top.
And I get the impression you endorse that view.
I kind of like that. I do kind of dig that. Yeah, I think community actualization is an important construct in and of itself. I think individual self-actualization is a very Western, pull yourself up by your bootstraps sort of thing, but independent individualism approach. But no, I like the idea of community actualization. I did not hear that Maslow ever reversed it. That would be big if it were true, because it suggests that maybe he was influenced more by the indigenous peoples than I thought he was. I know he did spend a summer with them, so that would be huge. Is that person still alive who said that?
No, he died more than 20 years ago. Unfortunately, his name was H. Dean Brown, and he was a physicist, one of the developers of the first major computer chip, the Z80.
Fascinating.
So he worked in Silicon Valley and was very active at places like SRI International, and he and Maslow apparently rubbed shoulders at some point, and I'm under the impression that what he shared with me is something that Maslow told him directly.
That's so interesting. Wow. Okay, well, I guess we'll never know for sure.
No, we won't. But with regard to that pyramid, which so many people know, and which you point out Maslow himself never created such a pyramid, but you have modified it into a sailboat.
So I have the boat itself represents the safety needs, the needs for safety, security, the need for connection, the need for self-esteem. And then the boat itself, the sail itself, you have to open if you want to sail towards the port that you want to sail to. So you need a very clear vision of where you want to sail to. And in order to sail, you need to open that sail and be vulnerable to the winds and the waves coming crashing down on you. So life is this constant back and forth between safety and growth. And that was Maslow's point.
Maslow didn't intend it to be like a video game where once you complete a certain level of attainment, then you're done. You never have to go back to that level. You just move up the pyramid.
That's exactly right. And yeah, that's why I really wanted to change the way we think about the self-actualization process. It's really a journey, and it's a direction, not a destination. And I don't think the pyramid ever really captured that.
Well, it does seem to me that self-actualization as an idea has taken root in our culture. I know, for example, in the corporate world, it's not enough just to offer employees a good paying job. Employees need to feel that their work provides them with opportunities for self-actualization these days. So that much of it, I think, has seeped into the culture.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right. It's not, but it's still, I wouldn't say it's the most prominent thing that corporations are interested in. I mean, do you really think that's the number one bottom line?
Absolutely not. No, I think it's something they kind of grudgingly have accepted because of the young people coming up who now expect it.
It's a shame. I mean, I'm doing some work in the space right now of human-centered leadership, and that's what I consult with companies about, and that's how I frame it. I don't call it self-actualization.
Human-centered leadership. In other words, self-actualization is almost a dirty word. It seems to connotate selfishness.
Yeah, I think so. Just people are not as familiar with what it means anymore. Yeah, but I think, but the topic of human-centered leadership is a real hot topic now.
Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close our interview today, Scott?
Let me think. Well, I think that it's not just me, but there are a bunch of people who are very consciously trying to show the importance of universal transcendence, of unity, connection, having people's basic needs met, but not neglecting their growth needs. You know, I humbly view myself as part of this. I think there is like a slow movement growing. I wish it was bigger. But I created the Center for Human Potential as a way to try to spearhead some of that, and we offer classes. You know, we're like our own version of Esalen, but in terms of science. The science, I think the new human potential movement has to be grounded in science to a very large degree. Not completely. Don't worry, Jeffrey.
I'm not worried about the lack of science. In fact, just the opposite, because as a parapsychologist, I am aware of over 1,000 empirical studies that talk about the existence of what parapsychologists call Psi. And I know you've told me on your podcast that you've interviewed people like Jim Tucker, who's working in this area. But I'm under the impression it's still a taboo topic within the halls of academia.
It is.
And yet the data is overwhelming.
It depends on who you ask. If you ask, Richard Wiseman, who was on my podcast. It's really a null effect if you try to replicate it. So it depends who you ask, but is it still worth investigating? Yes. Is there something there with psi phenomenon? Perhaps. I'm always looking for innovative ways of measuring the seemingly intangible, and I think that the future is hopeful for researchers who want to think outside the box a little bit. I would encourage people to study things that are less boring as what a lot of psychologists study these days.
Well, Scott Kaufman, I commend you for the work that you're doing, and I wish you well. I think it's important work, resurrecting the memory of the founders of humanistic psychology, positive psychology, transpersonal psychology. These are all, from my point of view, dear to my heart. And a very important part of my own coming of age. So it gives me a lot of heart to know that you're out there doing this important work, Scott. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. That really means so much coming from you. I'm a really great admirer of you and the tremendous legacy you left with your podcast. So I must thank you for having me on.
Well, I hope to have you on many more times.
Yes, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
We can talk about Rise Above next time.
So I know that your time is valuable, but I think our audience would appreciate more time with you, if possible.
Thank you.
And for those of you watching or listening, thank you for being with us, because you are the reason that we are here.
Book 3 in the new Thinking Aloud dialogue series is UFOs and UAP, Are We Really Alone? Now available on Amazon.
New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu. You can now download all 8 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free, or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.